there is a large number of students who come in from other countries to Britain, and they attend universities, and they keep universities going by the fees that they charge. We also quite rightly let in the dependents of people who've come here on a proper basis. So, as Fraser rightly says, there's only about a third that is actually changeable by effective policies. Now, as far as that third is concerned, I think we should unquestionably still continue to let people in who are genuinely fleeing from persecution, both because we've committed ourselves to doing it by international agreement and because it's morally right to do it. I think, as well, we should let in people who help our economy, help our country. Many of the people who come in on an economic basis come in to do jobs either because there's nobody here who can do those jobs, or there's nobody here who is willing to do these jobs. And I think we have benefited hugely as a country because of that immigration.
What about the projection for figures, 65 million? Does that worry you?
It does worry me, and I think, again, Fraser's point is right, that we should be utterly hard-nosed about what's happening. We should recognise that in order to deal with this, there needs to be infrastructure growth that can accommodate these numbers, but we need, I think, to recognise that that immigration is going to continue. We need to make sure we control the economic part of it, but it's an incredibly important maker of the society in which we now live. Okay. And it's a much, much better society as a result, I believe.
Okay. Man in the front here. Yeah.
Given that this country has an ageing population and a massive skills shortage, shouldn't we actually be putting a sign up saying, please come to Britain? Given how much it costs to get a plumber these days, isn't it good that we have Polish plumbers coming over and doing the jobs that British people don't want to do?
Lord Galloway.
My point much, much better than I did.
He's President of the Union, aren't you?
Of course he does.
And,
George Galloway.
And very good and hard-working and honest plumbers they are too. You know, these figures, these scare statistics. In the 1960s, at the height of the baby boom, we predicted that our population now would be 70 million. And in fact, it's 12 million less than that. They also predicted we'd be living a life of leisure, so it just goes to show how predictions go. But the idea that the country is full is obviously silly, as anyone who's ever flown across the country knows. In fact, most of the country is empty. My country of Scotland, Fraser's country, Charlie's country of Scotland, is actually one of the few countries in the world with negative population growth. Well, it's only just breasting it at the moment. But we, in Scotland, which is a country 7/8 empty, as a matter of fact, there's a dire need. And our young friend from the Oxford Union's absolutely right. Despite what Francis said, we have a low birth rate, a high abortion rate. Our birth rate is only as high as it is because of immigrants, and therefore, given the ageing population, we need new blood. We either breed it ourselves or we bring it in. I say bring it in. I lived in Britain when it was all white, when a night out was sausage, egg and chips and the music on offer was Billy Fury. Believe me, today's Britain is a much happier place to live in than it was then. Okay.
Woman in yellow. There, yes.
I totally agree with the panel that I think economic migrants are absolutely brilliant. They really are the lifeblood of our economy. They're doing the jobs that we don't want to do because of whatever reason. And I think the problem that needs to be addressed, however, is what they don't realise when they come over to our country. Yes, the wages are higher, but also the living costs are higher. And this needs to be addressed when you've got sort of 11 East European people living in the same dreadful accommodation. And I don't think we should be gasping every time we hear somebody criticise Eastern Europeans or wherever these migrants are coming from for using our public health services and our education system. I think we should be addressing those problems and ensuring that they're living in good conditions, as we do.
Okay. Does the questioner want to say, Theo Bartholomew, do you have a view about this?
Well, yeah, I think although it's very important that we have people coming in, we need to use the people who are unemployed in Britain. What are they doing if they're just sitting around? Surely we need to use them to work in our country as well.
I
but right now we don't really notice that we have 14% of the population on benefits, a huge figure. But if the immigrants weren't here, my God, we'd notice. There'd be huge labour shortages everywhere. We would be forced to actually confront this huge joblessness. So I think the immigration...
Fraser, a lot of these people are disabled. It's only fair to let the audience know.
How many of the 5 million people are disabled?
A very significant number are on disability. A very significant number. Well, unemployment is less than 2 million, so it must be 3 million if there's 5.
You think there's 3 million people who are so disabled they can't do any job at all?
Well, that's all right for you and an able-bodied, fit young man to say that. I've got constituents who are often hunted back into jobs and they're not capable of working.
Let's just stick with your point. Your point is that the immigrants pay for the social security for the people off work in this country.
I'm saying that they've covered up a lot of the social failures of this government. They're working so hard that we...
And he says that... Hold on a second. Yeah, I'm bringing in. But the speaker says, the questioner says, that should be addressed by getting those people back to work anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But we have no incentive to, if we can afford to keep paying them to do nothing, which we can.
I completely agree with what the person in the audience said. I mean, I think one thing you've got to bear in mind here is we can talk blithely about, having a point system and letting in skilled immigrants to supply our skill shortages. What we're effectively saying is that we're not going to pay enough in our education system to skill people properly. So we're going to cream them off from places like India and other societies where these people have been educated, usually at great expense. It seems to me that's a very, very curious way of dealing with skill shortages in the long run.
Okay. Before we take the next question, our address next week is Swansea, and the week after that is London. And if you would like to come to the recording of the programme in either of those places, 09011 114 411 is the number to call, or you can go to our website and call there. That's Swansea next week, London the week after. And a question from Tim Bursville, please.
Would it be, as President Sarkozy claims, intelligent to think of Tony Blair as President of Europe?
Would it be intelligent, as President Sarkozy claims, to think of Tony Blair as President of Europe? Apparently, Mr. Blair has just announced he's about to publish his memoirs, which keep him busy for a bit. Lord Falconer, you're an old flatmate and old friend, and I don't know what between you and Blair, but what do you think of this? Do you think he ought to be President of Europe?
Well, I don't know. I'd never thought about it before. I think he...
Oh, really?
I don't know why you're all laughing.
There's a band playing, believe it if you like.
I don't know. He's got great experience. He spent 10 years as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's a figure known throughout the world. I think it's a matter for the European Union to decide whether they want him.
Do you think Gordon Brown would like him to be President of Europe?
Gordon Brown said that he thought he'd be excellent in any international job.
Gordon Brown said he'd be great in any job, but there's been no discussion. It's premature to have any discussion. This treaty's still got to be ratified. There'll be no discussion until after ratification. Well, it's rather different from saying, he'd be brilliant at it. We'll have him.
Well, I mean, of course, I think there does need to be some discussion. Obviously, I don't know what the other European countries think. And it is a bit premature, I agree, but I'm sure Tony would be very good at it.
It would depend on Gordon Brown's vision, I suppose, really, and whether he'd expressed it adequately for you. Francis Maude.
Well, I think it'd be worth doing just to see the look on Gordon Brown's face when it happened. There would be a look of absolute horror, and so for that reason alone, I think it's very unlikely to happen. Actually, I think I'm a bit dubious about the whole concept of having a permanent president of the European Union. This is part of the now called EU Reform Treaty, not the Constitution, bear in mind, absolutely not the Constitution, under any circumstances, which the government promised at the last election we'd have a referendum on, and have now decided that this is really far too trivial to let the people of the country have a say on.
Fraser Nelson.
I think it's an excellent idea, because if there's one way of making sure Gordon Brown never cooperates with the EU again, it's having Blair as the president.
Maria Misra.
Well, I suppose it potentially caps the most inappropriate job that anybody could think of for Tony Blair after becoming a peacemaker in the Middle East. I think... I think it would be an utter disaster. He would be divisive precisely because of his attitudes to the Middle East and also his attitudes to America. I think that what Europe desperately needs is something to fill its legitimacy gap. And I can't see that appointing someone who I think by common consent in most historians will agree in 20 years' time was one of the most lightweight and unimpressive prime ministers in British history.